I'm Pastor Chris Brauns. I'm a pastor in Illinois. I'm the author of the book, Unpacking Forgiveness, and more recently, When the Word Leads Your Pastoral Search. And we've put together several videos to help churches that are in times of transition. We have as our guest today, Tony Craning of SEMA International, and SEMA stands for, help me with this one more time.
Yep, the System to Identify Motivated Abilities.
System to Identify Motivated Abilities. I said that well.
Yep.
And what that means is you not only personally have pastoral experience, but you now go into churches and help them call senior leadership?
Yep, and the focus that we really bring to it is to study the leadership attributes that the church really needs to be effective in the next season of ministry.
And we are also privileged to have from Colonial Church in Minneapolis, Eric Hansen, who's a leader there. He's on the church council, and Daniel Harrell, who is the relatively new pastor.
Not even relatively new, it's new.
Okay, you've been there, been there for 6 months after you were in New England, in Boston, for one of the most historic churches in our country. For how long were you there?
23 years at Park Street Church in Boston, yeah.
20, and that was one of the first things we wanted to come out. You made a move from a staff position with Park Street Church in Boston to Minneapolis, and it wasn't under cover of darkness. Tell us how your church in Boston, were they aware of the transition?
Well, they were aware, I think, that there was some interest in my life about transitioning. I think a lot of pastors, when they've been in churches for a long time, either get restless or, as I like to say, rested, comfortable. And I think for me, that was the rested piece that was spurring me a bit to consider perhaps a new chapter, and that's when Colonial got in touch with me.
So you just kind of felt like it was a comfort zone almost for you at Park Street, or?
Well, not in a bad way. I mean, it's not a sense in which I felt like I was coasting, but I do think that when you've been in a place a long time, your creativity loses some of its edge. I mean, a good sign that you've been somewhere too long is when someone comes up with a new idea and you say, oh, we tried that 8 years ago. You know, there's a lack of willingness perhaps to step into new things because you're pretty convinced you've seen it all.
And so Park Street was aware of that, and it was a positive thing that you know, there was a possibility of a transition.
Well, I think there was a willingness on Park Street's part to think and pray that through with me. It wasn't something that was necessarily being sought, but it was something that I think we all realized that if the right thing were to come along, perhaps we could work together for that to be a positive thing all around.
Now, Tony, you were involved in Colonial. You were the search firm that helped Colonial or assisted Colonial in calling Daniel from Boston to Minneapolis. What were some of the kinds of things that you helped them do? I mean, how does a church find someone that far away and have confidence that he's the right guy?
Yeah, that's a great question. Colonial really asked us to be very clear about the kind of pastor that was coming to them. And they had gone through a shorter term pastor, and I think there was probably a question or concern about really knowing, understanding, and having clarity about the next pastor they would call. So part of the process that Daniel went through was the SEMA process, which studies the individual. And we have about 800 ways to describe leadership. And so no two people are the same because the Holy Spirit doesn't make them that way, obviously. And so we went through a very in-depth study of Daniel's life, leadership, his strengths, in order to understand and compare them to a standard that we had developed for Colonial at the time.
800 ways?
Yeah.
I can't even count to 800. So you're looking back not just the past couple years at Park Street, you're looking over a long period of time at his leadership and whether or not he's a fit?
Yep. I think one of the ways we study people is to understand their stories. And in understanding the best stories of their life, the leadership and the way the Holy Spirit has created them, their operating system comes out in that. And so Daniel went through probably about 25 disciplined stories about the most satisfying, joyful ways that he has experienced his giftedness or his life.
Back up for a second. Eric, you were involved in leadership during this process. I know you weren't the search committee chair, but you were involved in leadership. How did you decide to work with SEMA?
Having been through a number of transitions in our church, we felt that there would be a benefit to having a third party help us identify and really vet potential candidates. We wanted to make sure that we weren't limiting ourselves to our own knowledge of people, our own network, and really with the limited time on a volunteer committee, that wasn't a part of the process as well.
That's one thing that I talk about in my book, is just the administrative demands of a pastoral search. Just organizing credentials, organizing sermon tapes. I guess now we listen online, so tapes, I date myself with that. But I guess organizing people's iPods or whatever. If churches do nothing else but hire someone administratively to track the search, I think that would be worthwhile. Your church, looking back on it now, feel like it was a good investment, but you know, you're going to be careful here, but sure. I mean, you think it was the right thing to do?
Absolutely. I think some of the benefits that we received by using an outside firm included the profiling that we did, really identifying a profile of what we were looking for, being able to expand the looking process, casting maybe a wider net than we would have been able to initially. And then again, the vetting and the professional process of interviewing and bringing the process to a conclusion was a huge help for us. And I guess I would say, in terms of the confidence of the church themselves, you know, that we had this partner with us in the process.
Now, Tony, something you said earlier, not during this take, but earlier, you said that Daniel for Colonial was one of the better fits that you guys have ever measured. Yeah. Okay, now listen, I know you're from somewhere in the South, right?
North Carolina. Yeah.
North Carolina, from the Confederacy, okay. And he lived with the Yankees in Boston, and now he's in Minneapolis. How do you decide that that's a good fit? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, and I'll start answering it, and then I think hand it off to Daniel to just talk a little bit about it as well. But I think when we study a pastor and look at the attributes, it gives a potential pastor a tremendous amount of confidence and sometimes a new way of thinking about their leadership. But on the other side, what we have is the study that we have of the right senior pastor or the ideal senior pastor. So we can help speak to, in being in that process with a person like Daniel, how that might fit up with Colonial. And he was not just one of the better, he was actually, in a disciplined way of looking at, the best fit we have ever had for a senior pastor to the critical requirements of the church.
That's cool. You know, Daniel, one thing that struck me as a pastor that you said, we talked on the phone, both you guys, how much you appreciate your leader in this pastoral search. Her name was Sue
Stanek,
Sue Stanek was, and you, not only during the process, but you also talked about some ways that the church helped your family make the transition from Boston to Minneapolis. Share some of those things churches might learn from about how to help a pastor make the transition.
Well, there's no doubt that Sue and Eric and the others were, you know, aware that after 23 years in one city, uprooting and moving to, you know, a new city, we weren't doing that, at least in Minneapolis, for the weather. And so that part of what they wanted to do was to make that as smooth and as inviting as possible. So not only the process itself, where, you know, the communication was kept open and clear and honest and informed, but once we had worked our way toward a decision, each week a member of the search committee must have been assigned by Sue to send us some piece of Minneapolis memorabilia or some information about the community, some piece of clothing with the University of Minnesota on it. Just a variety of things for myself, my wife, my daughter, to make those things work well. And going as far as setting up for my wife opportunities to be in touch with local publishing houses. She had a career as an editor, and to be able to have some of those conversations to demonstrate their concern for her connection with real estate agents, other people in the community. It was all very helpful.
He's still a Red Sox fan, though.
I was thinking it would be tough to give up the Patriots for the Golden Gophers or the Vikings.
And there wasn't necessarily an insistence I do that, which I appreciated, because that would be really tough to do.
Yeah, that would be really tough. Was it assigned? Did you guys assign different jobs for people to reach out to them?
We took a week. Each of us took a particular week and tried to coordinate so we weren't sending the same things. But yeah, we worked it out in the committee.
I still got a lot of wild rice, though.
Did you?
You know what? As a pastor, I know, and I'm blessed to serve in a place where people have done things like that. That is such an encouragement. I think it makes me a better pastor, and it accelerates building relationships. I mean, you think for you, your pastorate there began during the candidating process in some way, do you think?
Well, in some way. I mean, I think that your relationship with the church always starts with the search committee, and once you realize that, okay, we're going to take this step together, that you're the person that God has called to us, then that relationship shifts in a way that becomes truly the entry point into that congregation. And so you begin to get a taste and a flavor and an understanding through their eyes of what this church and this new adventure is going to be like. So it's all very good.
It's pretty cool. Yeah. My book, I open up with an emphasis on prayer. And how was prayer, I know that was a big priority to Colonial. Tell us a little bit, Eric, I mean, how was prayer involved?
It was really the bedrock for us of the search process. Even in terms of the meeting started out with devotions every time. We really wanted this to be a faith-based journey for us, but the prayer part was integral. I mean, for the congregation and for the committee themselves. And not just general prayer. I mean, we had times after church services where the congregation could come and pray with the committee about the process. The committee ourselves, we prayed at the doors of the church, we prayed in the pulpit, we prayed in the pastor's study. It was really the central part of how we went about looking for a new minister.
You keep saying things that are such a blessing to me as a pastor. I was beginning a ministry, and I knew that the search committee prayed in the pulpit, prayed at the doors of the church, prayed with SEMA. That would be an incredible, incredible blessing. You know, I make the analogy, it's probably been made too many times about pastoral searches, that it is about kind of analogous to looking for a spouse. You know, it begins with a little flirting. You know, they think you're cute, do you think they're cute, and all of that. But ultimately, it takes on that kind of seriousness, that you're looking for a match here that only God can put together. And if that's the case, then we've got to be humble and be on our knees and really be praying. I so appreciate Colonial Church being willing to send you down here and you coming down here and ministering to churches, encouraging them. Tony, I'm thankful for SEMA International. I'm praying that some churches take advantage of your kind of help. Thanks so much. God bless.